I'd like to begin by thanking everyone that has been associated with putting on this lecture series. As Reiner indicated, I've been working in the area of animal ethics for about 15 years, and I've never seen such a comprehensive speaker series at any university on the topic of animal ethics, animal rights, and certainly not one put on by graduate students. So I think they should be recognized by name. I hope all of them are in the room, and if so, I hope they'll stand up when I mention their names. Katharina Blesch, there, yeah. Alexandra Bräunig in the back. Guillaume Dondonnet, is that approximately right? Okay. Rainer Ebert, Stefan Buss, Niels Kessler, not here. Anna Silvanus in the back corner. Manja Ungar, Alexander Zemisch here, and Yi Zhao. Okay. Well, I appreciate all of your efforts, and I'm grateful to be here. It's always an honor for me and a privilege to speak in a German-speaking country. I apologize that my German is so bad that I have to speak to you in English. I sort of have roots from this region of the world. My mother is from Austria, and so it's always a pleasure to be in this part of the world. Okay. So the title of my talk is Do Animals Have Rights? I promised I wouldn't trip over that wire, and I managed 5 seconds. Okay. Do animals have rights, and does it matter if they don't? And I will be speaking primarily on the topic of moral rights as opposed to legal rights. Legal rights are created by governments, and they can be destroyed by governments, changing their constitution, for example. Moral rights, if they exist, aren't created by governments. Governments cannot destroy them, though they can violate them. Okay, and so my interest will be on the question of whether or not animals have moral rights. It's typically assumed that animal rights and duties to animals go hand in hand, such that either animals have rights, in which case we have direct duties to animals to respect their rights as a direct result of their having rights, or that animals have no rights and we have no direct duties to them whatsoever. An illustrative quote from Schopenhauer shows how these two views are often tied together in a single thought. Quote, "The assumption that animals are without rights and the illusion that our treatment of them has no moral significance is a positively outrageous example of Western crudity and barbarity." And then he goes on to say universal compassion is the only guarantee of morality. But if you look at the subject of the sentence, treated as a singular, right, the assumption that animals are without rights and the illusion that our treatment of them has no moral significance is a blah, blah, blah. So it's as if those two things go together, right? If you don't have rights, then they have no moral significance. And it may be the case that those two notions can be separated. Okay, just some preliminary questions. I don't know if this is typical in a lecture in a German setting, but try to get a little audience feedback early on to see if we have any sort of common ground. So if you're not shy, how many of you believe that human beings have rights? You can raise your hands. Okay, that's a start. Okay, now it'll be easier if so what rights do they have? If they do have rights, so maybe we can see if there's an agreement. Typically when people say that humans have rights, at least some of the rights that are attributed to them are rights to life, liberty, and bodily integrity. Would those of you who thought that humans have rights, would you think that these are rights that humans have? If so, just again with a show of hands. Okay. course, I'll be talking about this, so I don't need a show of hands here. Do non-human animals have rights, and if so, what rights? So, for example, if they have rights, do they have a right to life? Do they have a right to their bodily integrity? What rights would they have? If they have rights, does killing and eating them violate their rights? Is it morally wrong to do so? So, let's forget about animals again for a second. How many of you think it's morally permissible to kill and eat humans? A show of hands. Okay, the record will show no one raised their hands. But what about, is it permissible to kill and eat humans with their consent? I understand Germany has a little history with this. Have any of you heard of Armin Maiweis? Maybe you've heard of him under the name Der Kannibale. So did Der Kannibale do anything wrong when he killed and ate Bernd Jürgen Brandes with Brandes's consent? My understanding was that the general public thought this was an outrage. How many of you think it was still wrong of Der Kannibale to kill and eat Brandes, even though he, in some sense, consented? Okay, no, there's not as many people in agreement, but many people think that. And so that raises an interesting question. Most people certainly believe that it's okay to kill and eat animals. So the question is, if it's wrong to eat humans, even with their consent, is it permissible to eat animals without their consent? Because they don't consent to being killed and eaten. And then a final question is, are there any ways that it would be wrong to treat animals? Is there anything we could do to an animal that would be wrong to that animal? So if I were to walk up to a 6-month-old dog, a puppy, pour gasoline on it and light the dog on fire and let it burn to death, how many of you think that would be wrong? Okay. Again, pretty wide consensus on that. I don't know in Germany, I know in the United States that there are laws against that. That would be considered aggravated animal abuse, and it's actually a Class 3 felony. So that at least certain things it seems that we can do to animals, there's wide consensus that it would be wrong to treat them in that way. Okay, and that's, of course, independent of whether they have rights. Right? So that already starts to suggest that there might be a wedge that gets driven between the question of whether they have rights and the question of whether it's permissible to do just anything we want with them. Okay, so those are some preliminary questions. Well, why the question matters, here I have the question in mind is, do animals have rights? Why the question matters? Well, let's look at how we typically treat animals. We breed, confine, mutilate, kill, and eat them. We use them in painful psychological and medical experiments. We test cosmetics and household cleaning products on them by force-feeding these substances to them, or by placing these substances in their eyes, their anuses, and vaginas, till 50% of the animals die. We catch them in painful leg hold traps and kill them for their fur. We also raise them in confinement and anally electrocute them for their fur. Anal electrocution prevents the pelts from being damaged. We remove them from their natural habitats and families and place them in circuses and zoos for our own amusement. And we track them down and kill them for fun in sport hunting, not survival hunting, but sport hunting. So I think it's sufficient to say that we all think that treating human beings in any of those ways would be profoundly morally wrong. Now, if it's profoundly morally wrong to treat human beings in those ways, but morally permissible to treat animals in those ways, then there has to be some sort of morally relevant difference between humans and animals that would account for this difference in what it's permissible to do to humans and non-humans. So my thesis, here's what I'll be arguing for today. It's actually a kind of 4-part thesis. I've never had a 4-part thesis, but here it goes. First,